1939. Well, on April 9th of 1940, April 9th of 1940, this joke among the French ceased as Hitler demonstrated the true meaning of a lightning war to the French. He came in and just overran them. And within weeks of that attack, this powerful German army secured northern France along with these 5 other countries. So within weeks of their attack on April 9th, 1940, the Blitzkrieg against northern France, not only did the German army secure northern France, but they also secured these other 5 countries in the process. Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. So within weeks, by the end of April 1940, the German army had secured northern France, controlling northern France along with Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. What's that? Now, on June 10th, 1940, who declares war on both France and Great Britain? Italy. Very good, Italy. So seeing the successes of Germany in northern France and these other countries, on June 10th, 1940, Italy then declares war on both France and Great Britain. So you have a weird deal. You've got France kind of split in half. The northern part of France is under whose control? And the southern part is still liberated. Okay? Now, France was in kind of a grave situation. And the leader of the German-controlled French government became French Marshal Philippe Pétain. Philippe Pétain will become the leader of the German-controlled French government. And where's that government going to be located in northern France? At Vichy, France. So, on June 10th, 1940, Italy declares war on both France and Great Britain. France is in a tough situation right now. French Field Marshal Philippe Pétain becomes the leader of the German-controlled French government, which is located at Vichy, France. Okay, so you've got a country split in half right now. Okay, that takes us then to the Battle of Britain. Because you think the Germans are going to stop there with France? They're on their way. So when you think about Europe at this time, because the Soviet Union's not involved at this point, with the fall of France, Great Britain's standing alone in Europe against both Germany and Italy. Well, fortunately for them, on May 10th of 1940, Winston Churchill becomes the new Prime Minister of Great Britain. Fortunately for the British, on May 10th, 1940, Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of Great Britain. And I would kind of compare him maybe to a good head coach or a good teacher. He had a rare gift for leadership. He rallied the British. The British didn't have very strong hopes they could hold out against Germany and Italy. And Churchill's leadership and confidence strengthened their hopes and their determination to fight. And he assured the citizens of Great Britain that they would never surrender. So he came in there and he said, hey, despite what's going on in Europe, we are not falling like France did. We are going to fight. We will never surrender. So by the end of June of 1940, Churchill has to prepare the people of Great Britain for this upcoming Battle of Britain. Because he knows it's coming. He knows Hitler's coming with everything he has. So by the end of June of 1940, Prime Minister Churchill, using his great leadership, prepares the citizens of Great Britain for this upcoming Battle of Britain, which he knows is coming, an attack from Germany and Hitler. And that particular attack, which was known as Operation Sea Lion, occurred in August of 1940. So Hitler's attack, which went down in history known as Operation Sea Lion, occurred in August of 1940 when Hitler unleashed an all-out air attack against Great Britain. So in August of 1940, Adolf Hitler unleashes an all-out air attack of Great Britain known as Operation Sea Lion, which goes down into history as the Battle of Britain. Now, Hitler, picture this in your mind. Hitler's Air Force attacked Great Britain in an all-out effort. They wanted to sweep the Royal Navy from the English Channel. They wanted to sweep the Royal Air Force from the skies. And only because of Churchill's leadership and the fact that they fought so furiously did Hitler postpone his overall invasion of Great Britain until the next spring. He was going to hit them with the air attack, disable their army and navy, and he was going to march across the English Channel and take Great Britain. Because the Royal Navy fought so hard and the British Air Force flew day and night protecting their homeland, because of that great resistance, because of the leadership of Winston Churchill, Adolf Hitler decided to postpone his overall invasion of Great Britain until the next spring. A bad mistake, but he did it. Okay, the last thing we'll talk about today, you guys have been very good, are American defense measures. Because we're sitting over there watching all this, are we not? And we got to take some defense measures, because we don't know where this is going. Well, as the United States and President Roosevelt watched this conflict in Europe, the United States began taking some steps to strengthen its own defense in case something happened, which it ends up happening, right? And Congress was debating the issue of instituting the first peacetime draft in American history, where you would actually draft men into the military prior to being engaged in a conflict so you are prepared. So Congress is debating back and forth at this time, as they're watching the events in Europe, of instituting the first peacetime draft in American history. Well, finally, on September 16th of 1940, September 16th of 1940, President Roosevelt signed into law the Burke-Wadsworth Act. He signed into law the Burke-Wadsworth Act. And what this law did is it required that all men between the ages of 21 and 35 do two things. The Burke-Wadsworth Act required that all men between the ages of 21 and 35 do these two things. Number one, register for the draft. And two, take part in 1 year of military training. So the Burke-Wadsworth Act required all men between the ages of 21 and 35, number one, to register for the draft, and number two, start taking part in 1 year of military training. So they weren't really drafting them, but they were training them in preparation if they needed it. Now, what else would the United States be doing at this time watching what's going on in Europe? What might they be doing? What's that? Well, not so much training, but sending aid and supplies to Great Britain. They're trying to keep Great Britain afloat. France, northern part of France, has already been succumbed to German rule. So the United States was also sending aid and supplies to Great Britain. Now, when we sent those, the Great Britain paid us for those. But it wasn't long, because of the desperation, that Great Britain was no longer able to pay us for those supplies. And to be honest with you, we weren't going to give them to them for free. Okay? So to solve the issue of the fact that Britain had no more money to pay for these supplies, Roosevelt convinced Congress to pass the Lend-Lease Act. Lend-Lease Act. Now, what did that allow not only Great Britain, but all the Allies to do? Thus the name. Lend or lease materials from us, which would be paid back financially, monetarily, when? After the war. So, to solve the issue of non-payment, President Roosevelt convinced Congress to pass the Lend-Lease Act. This new law allowed not only Great Britain, but the Allies in general to lend or lease materials they needed for the war, and the money for these required materials would be paid back to the United States after the conflict ended. Now, this is kind of interesting because this law was passed in March of 1941, and guess how much the United States spent building ships, planes, tanks, and other supplies to send to the Allies? $7 billion. So we got after the wartime production after the Lend-Lease Act. And after it was passed in March of 1941, the United States spent $7 billion for ships, planes, tanks, and other supplies and materials that the Allies needed to get them over to Europe to make sure that the Germans didn't take over Europe. Well, we're trying to stay neutral, really trying to stay neutral. But in October of 1941, a German submarine torpedoed and sank an American destroyer called the USS Reuben James. Now again, that happened in October of 1941. A German submarine torpedoed and sank an American destroyer known as the USS Reuben James. Now, Americans were kind of split at this time. There were several Americans in this country that thought we should get involved in the war right away. And there were many that were against any entrance into the war. Well, the Americans who favored declaring war on the Axis powers thought this event of sinking the USS Reuben James was a reason enough to go to war. Other Americans were still very much against any entrance in the war, and President Roosevelt will be the one to ultimately make the decision, and he believed at this point, in October of 1941, that these actions by the Germans was not enough to declare war on Germany. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about rising threat from Japan, and which is ultimately going to lead to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Okay? And more than likely we'll do this tomorrow, or we'll watch debate depending on how things go. But we'll continue on. Now, you kids are going to be gone. Just keep up on this video and make sure you're keeping your notes up and organized and all that, so that when you get back, you're ready for the exam. Okay? This is tough material to miss, but I think you can probably do it. That's why we record it. So keep after it. Chantel, my dear, when are you going to be gone again?